I'm Sam Roberts of the New York Times, and welcome to the New York Times Close-Up. This week, we'll be joined by the author and Times Magazine reporter, Jonathan Mahler. He'll preview Gods of New York, his new book about what New York voters could learn from how the city fared in the 1980s. But first, let's welcome Kathy Wylde, the president and chief executive of the Partnership for New York City. She's been central in talks between the business community and mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani. Kathy's an authority on urban policy. She served on the Federal Reserve Bank of New York's board. She spearheaded citywide affordable housing initiatives and led the recovery of Lower Manhattan after 9/11. She's also directed over $130 million in civic investments to support growth in New York City. Welcome. You are the outgoing chief executive of the partnership. After 43 years of working with the partnership, people are afraid, the business community is afraid of Mr. Mamdani. Are you afraid of him coming in as mayor?
No, I think I still believe in democracy. The voters will speak in terms of the general election, but the voters spoke very strongly. It was very exciting in the primary to see 170,000 new voters come to the polls, because the lack of voter participation has certainly been a sign that our democracy was threatened. So I think the fact that he's excited and inspired young people says a lot for what New York needs. So I am hopeful. He's very young. There's a lot of concern in the business community about who he will hire to actually manage the city agencies, but also thinking about that he could be a great marketing agent for New York City for the next generation, keep us the destination for global talent, because he's a very compelling, charismatic personality.
Kathy, in terms of ideology, philosophy, agenda, President Trump calls him a communist. He describes himself as a democratic socialist. He wants to freeze rents. He wants free buses. He wants universal child care, other things that are certainly going to cost money and that some people, certainly in the business community, think are going to be counterproductive economically for the city. Does that worry you in terms of the economic agenda that he proposes?
Well, Sam, as you know, since the fiscal crisis of the 1970s, there's been a law in place where the city has to balance its budget, so he can't spend more than he has. And in process of balancing the budget, if they go out of balance, if they don't play by the rules, the mayor and the city council, we have a financial control board controlled by the state that takes over. So I am not worried about him driving the state or driving the city into bankruptcy, because we have laws that will stop that. And we've got a governor in Governor Hochul who has shown she can have her hand on the wheel, whether it's managing President Trump or managing Mayor Adams or potentially managing some of the excesses of a democratic socialist. But I really do think that I've watched him grow in the past year as he's reached out to the broader business community. He called me 2 days after the election and said, I want to meet the business leaders and reassure them that I'm not going to try and socialize their businesses, and I'm, a rational human being, and that I want to learn. And he has really taken the time since the June primary to meet a lot of people in the business community and to try and reassure them that he will listen. And I've seen him modulate some of his policies. When we met last spring before the primary, he said, he was talking about freezing the rent, and my response was, well, you can't freeze the rent if you don't freeze the costs, and how are you going to handle that side of the equation? And we talked about it. We talked about the importance of property tax reform, the fact that property taxes are 30% of the rent in rent-regulated buildings, and he has incorporated that into his agenda now to take on the task of reforming property taxes, which has been on the agenda for a long time and no mayor has had the guts to do. So I am hoping that that some of his bravado will turn into breakthrough new policies for the city.
Has he persuaded the business community? We just have former Mayor Bloomberg giving another $1.5 million to a pro-Andrew Cuomo PAC.
I think that he has persuaded most in the business community that he is a smart young man who will want to be successful. I think the issue really is that he has no managerial experience. So it's who will you hire? He has been unwilling to make commitments until a week or so ago he said, well, he would try and retain Jesse Tisch as the police commissioner. That was a great signal, but you know, there are a lot of agencies that require a very professional, experienced person at the helm, and where, you know, it doesn't matter if you're a socialist or a Republican, you got to run the place. And so that remains a concern. That's outstanding. And he has not managed to really gain the confidence of much of the pro-Israel Jewish community.
Is he an anti-Semite?
Absolutely, he is not an anti-Semite in my view, but his rhetoric is interpreted as an anti-Semite, as anti-Semitic rhetoric, and the sentiments are so high right now on the part of the Jewish community because of all the anti-Semitism that's going on and the reaction to Netanyahu and the actions in Gaza. I live in Bay Ridge, which is the largest concentration of Palestinian Americans, and you know, it's created a huge division in our city. He's going to, if he's going to be successful, if he wins the election, he is going to have to heal that rift. He is going to have to work really hard to assure the Jewish community that he represents them and their interests as well as everybody else in New York. And I think he is committed to do that from what I've seen, but that's going to be a steep path.
This is the 50th anniversary of the famous Daily News headline, Ford to City Drop Dead. Ford never said that specifically, but it seems to be what he meant at the time. Do we think Trump will say the same thing if Mamdani is elected?
We think the President Trump will take full advantage of the fact that he needs to keep a Republican majority in Congress, and to the extent that he can make a signal to the country that if you allow the Democrats to be in charge, you're going to be run by socialists. I mean, I think that temptation is too great to resist. But we also saw in the last couple weeks that a combination of the business community and Mayor Lurie, the new mayor in San Francisco, were able to talk him off of sending the troops into San Francisco. So I am hopeful that President Trump still has a great affinity for New York City. He wants us to be successful. We are 8% of the national economy when you look at the New York metropolitan area. We are obviously the global financial capital. We are the leader in applied AI, which is the growth sector of the tech industry. So I think that President Trump is going to want to keep New York successful. And so while I'm afraid that there'll be some political tensions, I'm hopeful that they're not going to turn into something that destabilizes the city and threatens our economy.
Kathy, of the candidates seriously on the ballot, Andrew Cuomo certainly has the most experience as a former governor. Why wouldn't more people be supporting him for mayor?
Well, I think Andrew Cuomo accomplished a lot as governor, but he also, when you're in these offices, he also made a lot of enemies. And so there's a very divided feeling. I mean, he was very tough as Attorney General on the financial industry during the financial crisis, and he was tough on the real estate industry in terms of some of the rent regulatory stuff that went through, the bail reform, et cetera. So it's when you have a record, there's lots to complain about. I mean, Mamdani has the advantage that he has no record.
Right. That's a plus in certain circumstances. That's true.
Yeah.
Was Adams that bad a mayor? After all, when you look at City of Yes, his getting rid of red tape, rezoning for affordable housing, sanitation breakthroughs under Commissioner Tisch. Substantively, was he that bad?
The Adams administration accomplished a lot in a positive way. And most important, in terms of Mayor Adams' contribution, he came into office after the business community, the real estate community had kind of been demonized for 8 years. And he embraced, he said, I want wealthy taxpayers here, I want the jobs here. So he really changed the psychology and the relationship between City Hall and the broader business community. And as a result, he led the economic recovery of our city. We went from having lost almost 1 million jobs during the lockdown of the pandemic to today we've got more jobs than ever in the city, more private sector jobs at 4.3 million. We've got
lower paid in many cases.
In some cases, yes, absolutely. But we've had a burgeoning tech sector, and they're paid pretty well. He also was very successful in, as you mentioned, major rezoning efforts, that the most important rezoning efforts in 50 years that were undertaken under the leadership of Maria Torres Springer, his deputy mayor, and Dan Garodnick, who chaired the City Planning Commission. They did a terrific job on that front. And he's brought down crime tremendously, despite some hiccups in the police department, ending up with the appointment of Jesse Tisch, who's just done a phenomenal job in showing the public that we can get a handle.
So how did he blow his pool of support?
What he said at a meeting of more than 100 of my members, so I'm not, he said, I realized that I came in with sort of a motley crew.
That's well put.
And no, he is a great human being. He really loves the city, and but his experience and his network of relationships when he came in was kind of the old Brooklyn crowd and the old police department crowd. And I think there was a real adjustment, and he had difficulty making that adjustment to what it's like to be under the spotlight of the press, of the media in New York.
It's a lot different from being borough president.
It is a lot different. Although everything what he was accused of happened when he was borough president and really had no control over the agencies he's accused of influencing. So the accusations against him were a real stretch. And then the migrant crisis descended on him very short into his term, with 240,000 migrants being initially bussed in by the governor of Texas. And that, he had to find $7 billion plus in our budget to accommodate them and get them in shelters and deal with all of that. So, so he really got hit by a lot of stuff that would have made it difficult for anyone who was mayor.
What would Mamdani have to do in his first months of office to make you feel even more comfortable with him as mayor? It's
all up to his appointments. I mean, if he has a strong team, and I'm hopeful that he would, it really depends on his appointments. And that would be the case if Cuomo is elected mayor as well, or Curtis Sliwa. It's, as Mike Bloomberg made very clear, your success as a mayor is who you put in charge of the agencies and in the deputy mayor positions, and how you support them to get their job done.
Are rich people really going to create an exodus from New York if he wins?
I think the issue about retaining our tax base, retaining rich people in New York, I think that's a little overblown. New York is very sticky, as they say. People don't like leaving New York. You talk to people who go to Florida, they come back, they stay there 180 days, but they want to come back to New York as much as possible. So I do not see an exodus of the wealthiest people. Our problem is with attracting new wealth. I don't know if you saw a study by the Citizens Budget Commission a month ago or so that said we are losing our market share of millionaires coming into the city, or of millionaire population to Florida and Texas, where the taxes are so much lower. So there is sensitivity. So for attracting new talent, which is the lifeblood of the city, I think we've got a challenge, both because we have the highest taxes in the country. I mean, now people who are upper middle class are paying 55% of their income to the government and getting no state and federal tax deductions, or no state and local tax deductions at the federal level. So for those folks, they had a big tax increase in 2018 when the so-called SALT deduction was virtually eliminated. And so we've had our tax increase, and we did lose people as a result of that tax increase. But I don't think, I mean, the issue is, does the city stay safe? Number one. That's why, you know, everybody says it's so symbolic to hang on to Jessie Tisch, because they have confidence that that's her priority and that she's shown the ability to keep our city safe and make it safer. So that's the big issue. And then two, can talent, especially young talent, afford to live here? When the average asking rent today is almost $3,600 a month, $42,000 a year, what do you have to earn? I mean, you basically have to earn close to $150,000 to afford that. And if you've got kids, it's $26,000 a year to $40,000 a year for child care services if you're in a job. So there's all of that. And then there is the erratic nature of our immigration policies at the national level. And for the first time, our country is going to see fewer people coming in than moving out of the country. And New York has always been fueled by foreign immigration to grow our population and bring in new talent. So there are a whole bunch of challenges ahead, and this is something that no mayor is going to be able to handle alone. It's going to take a united New York City. This is what's upset me so much about the negativity and the divisiveness and the name-calling that have gone on during the mayoral campaign. We need to come together to deal with these challenges.
Thanks to Kathy Wylde, the President Chief Executive of the Partnership for New York City. Coming up next, Jonathan Mahler, the author of Gods of New York and a correspondent for the New York Times Magazine. Jonathan Mahler of the New York Times has a new book, The Gods of New York: Egoists, Idealists, Opportunists, and the Birth of the Modern City, 1986 to 1990. It does more than chronicle the city's pivotal struggles. It offers perspective and lessons from the past, battles over affordability, civic division, inequality. Those battles speak directly to New York's current challenges. Jonathan, welcome, and thank you for joining us. Jonathan writes for the New York Times Magazine. Are there gods of New York today?
I don't think there are to the same degree, and I think that is, it's a sort of function of a variety of factors. Kind of maybe most prominently, I think it's the changing role of the media. I think, the title Gods of New York is a little bit tongue-in-cheek. It's sort of a semi-ironic title because these guys were, of course, not actually gods.
But they were pretty big characters.
They were big figures. They were kind of Greek gods, I guess, more than Judeo-Christian gods.
With their tragic sides.
Exactly. And their wrath and pettiness, too. And, I think what made them gods, to a large extent, were the tabloids. You could also look at them as tabloid gods, which kind of elevated them. The cover of the tabloids, known as The Wood, famously in those days, could turn you into a massive celebrity. And you could, if you were Donald Trump or Al Sharpton, you could. Or at Koch, of course, you could stay on the cover of the tabloids for days and weeks on end. I don't think we have now these kind of, we don't have, the tabloids don't have the same hold over the city. So, you don't have that platform to create gods. And, and I think that the city's also just, itself has kind of fragmented. It's not, back in the 80s, New York really still felt like one city. I mean, it was a roiling mess with a lot of colliding forces, but it was still kind of a single place, and everyone was kind of focused on the same story. And that, the same cast of characters. Now it's everyone lives in their own New York now. Everyone is inside their own bubble. If you know you're super wealthy, you probably frequent just the same small handful of restaurants in a couple of different neighborhoods.
Or you order in from the same place.
Exactly. It's just different. So I think I don't think you have gods in the same sense. I mean, you can think about who they might be. I'm struggling. I mean, you might have at one point said Jerry Seinfeld was a god of New York. You know.
Is it a national phenomenon? We don't all watch the same three networks anymore. We don't necessarily read the same publications anymore. And it's certainly true of local news coverage, as you say, whether television or newspapers too. Has power just become so much more diffuse? You could look at power brokers in the 70s and 80s and identify 4 or 10 of them pretty easily.
Yeah.
Now it's pretty difficult to get those people in a room and get something done.
Yeah.
Why is that? Why has it become so much more diffuse?
Yeah, I mean,
And what are the consequences of that? Is that a good thing, that there's more populism, more democracy, if you will, or a bad thing?
Well, I think if you want to kind of look at this as a more national trend and a more national question, put a national frame around it, I think what you might find is that the gods are now the tech overlords, right? They're the ones who are who have all the power and all the influence, that is a great deal of power is now concentrated in a small group of individuals, whether it's Jeff Bezos or Larry Ellison or Elon Musk. So they are not gods in the same sense that I write about in The Gods of New York. But they are maybe overlords is another way to think about them. Yeah.
We heard from Kathy Wylde that Mamdani may be in a descendant, if you will, of John Lindsay, of David Dinkins. But is it the same thing? Aren't his hands tied, as she said, by the fiscal crisis, by the constraints imposed after that? Can he do the same things, arguably the same kind of damage that Lindsay inflicted by the lack of fiscal constraint back then?
Yeah, no, I think he is in a very different situation, and I think that the sort of paradox here and the challenge for him is that he is talking about the city and the government taking a much stronger hand in the management of New York City. I mean, for many years, for decades, the city has largely been run by the business community. As Kathy Wylde knows better than anybody, the business community and the real estate developers and Wall Street, that is where all the power and influence was. And that remains where all the money is, and thus where all the power and influence remains. And so, he's talking about, in a sense, about the government sort of taking back the reins and starting to reshape development and making kind of sort of bolder, more ambitious strokes in the city. But that's going to be a very difficult thing to do because the city is now so dependent on a small group of millionaires and billionaires, and he will alienate them at his peril.
The Times review of the book said, as New Yorkers prepare to vote once again on whether the benefits of a stratified city outweigh the costs, on whether it's time to turn the page on the ghosts of the past or to keep fighting them. What do you think that meant? It left me a little baffled.
Yeah, I mean, I think what the reviewer was getting at there, though I agree it was a bit unclear, is that the city really, in this period I write about, really the post-fiscal crisis era, the 1980s, the city really gave itself over to capitalism, to unrestrained, unconstrained capitalism. It rebuilt its economy around Wall Street, around finance, around real estate, and basically put its faith in the hands of private industry. And this is you can call it neoliberalism if you want to, but that would be the sort of loftier, more technical term. So now I think the question he's raising is that in a sense that this mayoral race is a bit of a referendum on that transformation. This is an opportunity. Mamdani is promising to reverse that. He's basically saying, that the city has become too unaffordable, too unfair, and too many people are being left out. And he wants to flip the script. He wants to sort of reinvent the city's identity in a sense. And so those, I think, are the ghosts of the past he's talking about.
Didn't de Blasio sort of do the same thing when he talked about a tale of two cities?
Rhetorically, he did the same thing.
Yeah.
But I think there are some significant differences. I mean, one is that, first of all, de Blasio was almost elected accidentally. I mean, he didn't have a movement behind him,
right,
the way that Mamdani
for sure
does. A movement that conventional Democrats and conservatives in the city and the business community has spent millions of dollars trying to stop, seemingly to no great effect. So I think that Mamdani is like, there's a movement behind him, and I also think that while it's true that de Blasio was sounding those same themes, and he did start universal pre-K, which was a big kind of bold, ambitious, progressive program. I don't think he once he got into office, he quickly recognized that he had to protect his relationship with the business community, with the real estate developers, and I don't think he was not a sort of a revolutionary figure. I mean, I think that Mamdani may not be either.
But he seems like one.
He sure seems like one. He's certainly positioning himself as one.
Jonathan, what happened to our perception of those gods in the decades since then? Ed Koch obviously his administration got mired in scandal, but in his third term, he also built an enormous amount of housing.
Yeah.
Rudy Giuliani, a prosecutor, maybe too aggressive, but then became a mayor who proved, for better or for worse, that New York was governable, then went downhill as a presidential candidate and a Trump toady.
Yep.
Al Sharpton matured, one might argue. In retrospect, what do we think of these gods?
Yeah, well, each one is sort of, it's a different story, it's a different arc. I will say that I think one thing that kind of unifies all of them is that this was the crucible for all of these guys. This was where they all learned the power of publicity, where they all learned how to kind of build a story in the media, and how powerful that could be. So I mean, obviously, most prominently that's Donald Trump's great gift.
Yep.
But Al Sharpton too. And what both Sharpton and Trump learned in particular during those years was that it didn't matter in a sense what people were saying about you as long as they were talking about you, right? And that is what ultimately kind of elevated Donald Trump. That was his playbook. And for Sharpton too, it's what enabled him to amass power and influence, and as you say, enabled him to kind of move from an outsider to an insider. I mean, which is really what he's done. I mean, Rudy's arc is just crazy because he was, of course, positioning himself and framing himself as the most kind of morally righteous figure in the city, the prosecutor who could have been a priest, and then he goes on to seemingly become about the most morally bankrupt public official, public person in our country. So
Yep.
yeah.
Jonathan Mahler of the New York Times, the book, The Gods of New York, Egoists, Idealists, Opportunists, and the Birth of the Modern City. Thanks so much for joining us, and that's it for this edition of Close Up. For the New York Times and CUNY TV, I'm Sam Roberts. And don't forget to download the CUNY TV app. You can catch our weekly program anytime, anywhere.